Um, so we don't have any business arising, so we'll go straight into our guest, Curtis. I think everyone knows Curtis Ross, an extremely busy person,
Hmm.
and we do thank him for taking the time. He's just here to, he's the CEO for the Thompson Regional Airport. And I'm glad that we have Shaw and the Thompson Simpson, and we have CHCM, so we can get good coverage of everything we talked about the Thompson Regional Airport. So, and you don't have a chance to eat, so
I can't say no comment.
you,
No.
you can eat after. So you want to just take it away?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll have to apologize because this one fell off my calendar. So I don't know. I'm not an iPhone big advocate. They gave me this iPhone and I missed my BlackBerry. Thanks for the opportunity to come talk. And it's more of just of an update of what's been happening at the airport. Um, and you know, I'll start right off. Everybody's looking for that terminal building, and that's kind of where our primary focus is these days. Is shifted from the airside infrastructure over onto the how do we develop or do we develop a new terminal building? Over the past couple of years, we held some public hearings, met with stakeholders, tenants, everybody involved that would have any interest in the new terminal building or renovation of the existing one. From those public hearings, it was very apparent that there was concern over cost, what it would cost, the high cost of travel already. Can we minimize that impact, and do we really need a terminal as big as was being proposed? Lots of good comments, lots of smaller things that came into the picture as to the types of tenant spaces in the building, the need and requirement. We call it programming. So we took all that information back. We kind of digested it over the last year and a half. But what we also did is during the winter months, people don't know this, but we continued to do our due diligence. So we drilled another series of about 100 holes at the airport, doing some geotechnical investigation on the south side to see one was to do with reconstruction of our apron, to see what it would cost us to rebuild the south side apron. And the second one was to try and figure out if at all, if it was possible to reconstruct the existing terminal or a portion of the existing terminal and add on to it and build onto that. And it was part of our due diligence process that we've been going through anyways, and it was on our scope to do that. We got all that information back in the last few months. We've again reviewed it, looked at it, and unfortunately, and it's to no surprise, everybody knows that there's a lot of issues on the south side. It came back, and on the side we were hoping to construct, which is facing towards where the Ford cold weather testing facility would be, we basically hit glaciers under there. From 5 meters down to 12 meters, it was discontinuous permafrost. And we're not talking small ice crystals, we're talking lenses that are 2 to 3 inches thick. So that pretty much kiboshes any proposed construction or additions to the building. At least speaking with the engineers and engineering firms, nobody wants to touch it because they know the history of what's been happening on that side, the cost of doing that kind of business, and they just said, your money is not well spent on that side. You're basically going to have to over-engineer and over-design it. Not that we can't do it, but it's going to cost you more for your foundation than it will for your superstructure. So that pushed us back into looking at the north side development. And we had looked at, even on the south side, what we had looked at was a phasing in of building a new terminal building. So instead of building the 30,000 square foot terminal building that we wanted to, could we build this in components, and could we build this in phases as we needed the space and as we seen the growth in the airport grow over the next few years. So what we did is we took that concept and took it back to the north side, and we said, okay, we originally came up with a design of a terminal building, and you'll remember a few years ago I stood up and I had a nice glossy picture, and that building was about 38,000 square feet. There's been some changes locally in the industry. There's been some changes on how the carriers work from an operational standpoint. And the economics, what we've looked at is that forecasting and our history of our airport. And we said, we function fairly well. To give you scale, our terminal building now is 14,000 square feet approximately, and we can function fairly well if it was configured properly. What we lack is tenant spaces, that being a few more retail spaces for some food kiosks. We have some other tenants that want to be at our airport. For tourism, meet and greet kind of places, and just overall public space. So we went back to the architects and said, here is our program, here's the programming we came up with initially, the want and the asks from everybody out there in the public, and here's what people are willing to pay for. And then we've now been able to shrink the building down from 38,000 square feet, and we're down to approximately 20,000 square feet, which brings our build costs down significantly. And then there was some additional things that we had that were wants but not necessities. We had on the front of the building, we had a facade, an enclosed-in walkway all along the apron side of the building. That was a want, but there's a cost to those wants, and then we listened to the people, and they said, we don't want to see increases in our tickets. We don't want to see increases in our costs of operations. So those things kind of have to be scaled back a little bit. Not to say we're taking all of it away, but we kept what we found was to be critical points that get used day to day within the building and that generate the revenues that pay for the building. So we hope to, in the next couple months, be able to roll out what we call now the Plan C, because we're down to that iteration of it already. We started off with kind of the base concept a few years ago, got down to the programming that said this is what people wanted, and then we looked at the south side construction or adding on to the building. We had some plans drawn up for that, just basic plans, footprints, in anticipation that if all the drill results came back positive and we could go ahead with south side development, that we might have been able to get in the ground as early as this year. When the drill results came back negative, we had already looked at north side as possibly having to going back to, but on that phased in program. So what we're doing now is focusing on that phased in development. We've also shrunk down some of the parking requirements. There'd be a single road coming in instead of a dual road unless we get lots of participation from the government on that, and maybe that would change, maybe our new MLA or would help us with that. So we'll see. I mean, we've gone back. We're going to bring some of that costing up to date. Current dollar values, believe it or not, our costing is actually coming in lower, and that is partially due to the economic climate out there. People are being a little bit more aggressive in their pricing because the jobs just aren't as plentiful as they were, or the projects aren't as big as they were out there a few years ago when we first rolled out this project. I mean, lots of things were still happening across Canada. There was lots of big mega projects out there, so we were competing with those. Our project is actually becoming quite attractive on a number of levels, both from a funding level now and from a banking level and from an infrastructure level. So we're quite positive that we can see something here in the next year start to develop. The other thing that goes along with that, and the other key thing for us, like I always tell people, that we're like a little community onto ourselves there. Unfortunately, we have to provide our own water and sewer, and that's a big cost. Most airports across Canada are either fed by a municipal system, or they're owned by the municipalities or the cities, and so that cost is provided to them in the operation. Unfortunately, in our model of our airport, because we're sitting in the LG of Mystery Lake and because we're not connected to any water and sewer, any big developments like this, we have to develop our own infrastructure to support it. We had developed a new sewage lagoon a few years ago, which can be expanded to facilitate this development. So that is already in the process, the costing for that, and we had gone through that exercise when we looked at the development of the first building. What we were able to do in this past winter is we undertook a groundwater investigation, is what we called it. So basically we went looking for a well. Can we reduce our cost of providing potable water and fire safety water to the airport without having to draw water from the river system? Because the utilidor on that system alone was going to cost us about $5 million to $7 million to bring a utilidor from the river to our airport site. But under our groundwater investigation, we hit what I would call basically an oil well of water this year. We struck gold. There's no other. Even the people that were drilling, it's an anomaly. What we found in northern Manitoba was unheard of. He went back to the previous hydrologists and people that used to drill wells to find some history in Thompson to see if they had found anything like this, and they hadn't. Pressurized water. I kid you not, it blew the cap off it the other day. It's been capped for a year now, and it blew the cap clear off it the other day again. It pumps, to give you scale, most wells, if you get a good well in Thompson, you might be getting 15 gallons per minute. That's a good well. This thing free flows at 300 gallons per minute. We basically hit an aquifer underground, an ancient aquifer is what we've done. We've had the water tested. It's potable water. It's good water. We could actually just remove the iron and the hardness out of it, they are telling us, without going through water treatment if we wanted, and it would be good drinkable water. We had drilled 7 holes, and 2 holes came back very positive. So this is a very high producing well. They pumped that thing for 48 hours steady, and they couldn't pump it down. They couldn't draw it down. Like, it just kept producing water. It's similar to the artesian well that's at McCready Campground. Like, if you just hit the right seam, and I'd like to take credit and say this is that we knew exactly where that water was, but we had a hunch because there was a mining company that drilled about 15 years ago on the airport, and they were doing a core sample. And it's kind of in line with this area, and we knew more or less where it was on the airport, but it was about 700 to 1,000 yards off to one side and further up towards our runways, believe it or not. And when they did their core sample, they had the same issue. They drilled this core sample and it blew the water out their core sample, and they had a heck of a time capping it. So we said, let's try and line up with that, but off the airfield, and see if we can find this seam where this thing goes. And so we kind of shot between the existing well that was at the airport, which in its day was pumping close to 100 gallons per minute, which was a good well, but it was just poor quality water. And we struck this thing last December. So we hit this thing. So we knew we've had this. So what it does for us, the short strokes of all this conversation, is it saves us having to bring a utilidor in, because now we've got potable water that we can draw right from a source right there. So our reservoir size shrinks significantly because it produces such a vast amount of water. So we're quite excited about that. That was a bit of a cost savings that we can see in our redevelopment of this water treatment plant. So what we've gone back, we're working with Stantec Engineering out of Winnipeg, based on the first set of plans drawn for the water treatment plant that we had done when we presented the last project to both the federal and provincial governments. We said, revise all our drawings, revise all our calculations based on this. We actually sunk a 5-inch well. They couldn't get a pump down it because it kept pushing the pump out the well. So they're gonna drill an 8-inch production well beside this. So we'll have redundancy built in from day one. We'll have a 5-inch and an 8-inch well. So what it does is what it will do for the future of the north side of the bridge is there's a possibility that at some point in time other entities could connect to our water system on that side if we go ahead, which could bring along development on that side if the city so chooses or somebody else so chooses in the future. We're not designing the water treatment plant on that scale, but we have talked to Stantec and said we want that to be a scalable unit, that if somebody should choose that they want to build something, i.e. by the golf course or something, that there's a method of them drawing from that and the capability. What it'll do for us at the airport is not only service us for the new terminal building and our fire, the biggest thing was the fire safety issues, the fire suppression. We had to be able to provide the sprinkler systems in the new structure because of the size of it, but it'll also provide that to our tenants that are at the airport. It'll give them that ability to expand or have potable water right to their door within the terminal. So like I said, lots happening out there. We finished up recently an electrical project which was $3.5 million, which is small by the terms of the airport projects. We've replaced all our airfield lighting, new field electrical center with all our backup emergency generators. That's all been replaced. If you drive down at nighttime and you're going towards North Hangar Road, you'll see all the new lights facing up towards the highway. They're all new LEDs. They look like Christmas lights. It looks really pretty, but it's $3.5 million pretty, so just so you know. So nothing's cheap at an airport. Yeah, that's kind of the Coles Notes versions of what's been happening at the airport. We are building another building on the north side. It's a new sand shed over there, and we did buy one of ComAir's existing buildings that was on the north side, non-air side. It used to be kind of a maintenance shop, a storage building for them, and Thompson Airport bought that, and we're using that in our inventory for lots of our new equipment that we've purchased and we want to keep out of the elements when it's not being used. So, yeah, so that's kind of my update of what's been happening at the airport to date.
I'll open up for questions, but just one point I have on mind. Based on Plan C that you guys are looking at right now, does that still keep it open for the potential of any additional airlines wanting to come in?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, part of the planning of the development of the new terminal is to attract business of all sorts, not just airlines, but retail, tourism. You know, it is, and Volker can speak to this in volumes. It is our first point for a lot of people coming through this community. It's their first impression, right? We have that opportunity to make that impression upon them from not only, not just the tourism aspect, but you know, you think of all the people going to Kiosk right now. They come through that terminal weekly. They may come back as a tourist in the future. They may come back as a business owner in the future. Those are the impressions we have to make on people, so, yeah.
With the new federal government that we have, the Liberals, one of the commitments that they made was they want to be from the state the Churchills want to talk about, including in this case. I think it's important to have a report on that. Do you see anything happening federally where they say, well, you're right, a stepping stone from Thompson? Like part of it's not just a port for ships, but flying would be a part of that. So you see any movement in that will move forward and have more of a presence. They
Yeah.
need that stepping stone.
Well, it's interesting because yesterday I got the transcript from Ottawa, from Marc Garneau, Minister Garneau, and his comments as to what was being said and what was actually being implied. Being good ministers that they are, they talk, you know, you have to read between the lines and what their message is sometimes, but it sounds very positive for us in the aviation industry, but what they're pushing right now And it'll be interesting to see, and I think it's geared mostly towards the larger airports, the NAS, what we call National Airport System, which is the Winnipegs, the Torontos, Vancouvers. They're pushing for more foreign ownership. So they're saying if the governments can't provide all the infrastructure money, we're going to open it up so if a foreign investor wants to invest and purchase these airports or be part owner in these airports, that they can provide that infrastructure money for a return on investment. That's the Coles Notes, again, version of what's being said. And within that, he is talking about, once again, a national transportation system that includes kind of the small and regional airports, which include us. So from my perspective, it's positive to hear that being spoke about again, because it hadn't been for the last few years. It was kind of taken off the table, and we've had a hard time getting access to the people that control those entities, you know, the purse strings involving transportation. So we're finding a very positive, we have.
Major steps are towards that.
Yeah, so I think we're heading in the right direction. To say whether Churchill is that place or Thompson is that place, I think it's important. You know, I think Churchill is as important as Thompson is, as Winnipeg is. Because if we don't have those connections and feeders, then nothing works properly. We are that interlink, whether somebody wants to fly to Thompson and then get on the train from Thompson and go to Churchill, or whether they want to fly over to Churchill and then come back through Thompson and spend days. All those places are important. I mean, the other thing for us, and this is kind of the fact that I try and hit home, is everybody thinks it's Calm Air as our carrier, our major carrier. We do more volume and more traffic with Perimeter than we do with Calm Air. And that's the communities that are outlying, that rely on our airport more than anything else. If our airport could not feed or, you know, provide services to those communities, we'd have a huge problem in those communities. You know, I mean, they're already have some logistics issues, but that is how important we feed those 22 northern airports. To me, that's still opportunity from a tourism aspect, from a freight aspect, everything that goes along with that. We are trying to grow that other market, that interconnection with Churchill and the tourism, and, you know, move forward with that. So yeah, we will see some dollars. I think already Churchill has seen some dollars funnel towards them to help them with that. And I feel that if Thompson brings the right project to the table, and I think we've done our due diligence. I think nobody can fault us in that. We've spent 7 to 8 years studying this and bringing the stats and the statistics and the numbers behind it all, that this is a supportable project from all levels of government. Yeah, so, yeah.
Just off your water supply for Mosquito, of course, you know, makes snow there. Really? And it's done, it's supplied by 2 well pumps. One is 60 gallons a minute, and one is 110. So that's 170 gallons a minute. And we sometimes have run that system 24/7 for 5-6 days in a row, right? Because Mosquito basically is an estuary, it's like a big sponge. So you have a water supply, what did you say, 300?
300 gallons per minute.
That's remarkable.
It's unbelievable.
You should start a water supply factory.
I keep getting up in the morning and pinching myself and thinking, did we really hit this? You know, and I've read the report over and over. And the guy from Friesen Drillers, he's just beside himself. Like he says, I've drilled wells all over Manitoba.
So what's going on in the ground that produces that kind of pressurized water?
Well, they figure it's an ancient aquifer is what it is, because they can tell by the isotopes in the water how old some of this stuff is, right? And believe it or not, this is how it goes back. If you read the whole report, it goes back to the days of when nuclear testing was going on, and the isotopes that are left behind and where they end up in the ground and the level that they get to, how that's what they use for measuring all this, the quality and the age of the water, you know. So I mean, there's a lot more science to it, but it was quite interesting to read the report. And like I said, he phones me you know, to talk about it still. It's just, I was on the phone with him the other day, because we had to phone him to how to cap this thing. Because it blew this cap, and I mean, I should put it on our website, but there's 3 guys trying to get this cap on this thing, and I felt sorry for them. It's a good thing it wasn't minus 40. You know, it was a half decent day, but I mean, it was like trying to cap an oil well. It was just, yeah, so.
That would, on Air's downside, it has to have an impact on the number of flights that go in and out, right?
Well, so far, what we've seen is a change in the flight schedule. So we used to have a connection flight between Flin Flon, the Paw, Thompson, and that they've dropped that off their schedule, and it comes down to dollars and cents, right? For them, it's operational. They're looking at their load factors on that, and if they're coming out of Flin Flon and the Paw with 3 passengers coming this way, you know, the writing's on the wall that they can't afford to do it. It would be no different from Gardewine coming down the road with 1 piece of freight in the back of their truck. I mean, there's some logistics and some operational things. What we've seen at the airport, and again, it's just the changing, and I've understand this about airlines, is they're very dynamic and they react very quickly to markets. How they operate and what their structure is. So we've seen a lot of downsizing at the airport as far as employees. They still have their base there. They're still doing a certain percentage of maintenance there, and they're moving a ton of freight out of there. We're back to being, you know, the freight kind of flips from us to Churchill, from us to Churchill. Well, they're back in Thompson moving freight because it's still cheaper to truck it as far as you can. So they move it as far as they can, which is Thompson, then put it on a plane and move it out of here. Whereas flying it from Winnipeg to Churchill is a very expensive proposition, right? So we're seeing our freight go up exponentially again. Our passengers has dropped a little bit. I'm not sure where the schedules are heading. I think we should invite Mr. Borovage, Mr. Borovage, previous Mr. Bell, or one of his people to the chamber, and maybe they can give some insight into where they're heading with their schedules. And I think they are going through some aircraft changes, so that will change schedules. If they put a bigger, i.e. if they go from an ATR 42 to an ATR 72, you might see less flights but more passengers being able to handle on that flight. So.
Tom Air has reduced their schedule to Thompson Churchill to now they bumped it up again. I think there's more than 1 flight a week now. So
Yeah, I can't keep track of these guys. I'd like to say I can, but it really depends what their demand is, and that's what I said. They're very dynamic. You know, like I can look out my window some days and I'll see an ATR 72, an ATR 42, a Dash 8, a Dash 7, and 5 Metros out there at 4:30. And the next day, you know, I might have the Jet and an ATR 72 out there. So it's depending where they are in their cycle and their maintenance cycles and everything else. It can change, but I mean, I'm still very thankful we have the people that are dedicated, you know, because a lot of people are fighting to get a dedicated service to their site. Never mind 1 carrier, but we have 2 carriers that service us fairly well. So, not to say I wouldn't want 3 or 4 carriers here, you know, but airlines here, but we're fortunate to have the ones we do. So, yeah.
Thank you, Curtis. Appreciate it. Everybody give Curtis a round of applause for a unusual journal.